Okay, on the show today, Leslie Potter. She is a parenting coach, all things parenting and conscious parenting. Comes highly recommended by a mutual friend. Joining us from Boulder, Leslie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How you doing today? I guess it's morning time there.
It is morning. Yes, it's 8 o'clock here.
And how are you?
What is it there?
It's 3 p.m. In the UK, so it's a sort of slightly sticky, muggy 3 p.m. And let's dive in. What's your journey with the body and with your work?
Yeah, well, I was born in a home to a raging alcoholic mother, and so I learned very early to leave my body, if you would say, and go into my imagination. So I began to live outside. And so my journey was one of avoiding embodiment, I would like to say.
I can relate to that. Okay. So avoiding the body, traumatic home. And what got you back in it? What switched there?
Well, one of the things I did love to do was dance. I was an actress. I lived in New York. I was, a crazy bohemian. I traveled Europe. I did all kinds of embodiment for pleasure. Right. But anytime there was embodiment and pain was involved, especially relational pain, I would actually leave. So I organized my life not to feel certain feelings. So at some point, I guess probably in my mid-30s, I read a list of codependency. Someone gave you the 15 things of codependency, and I think I had 13 of them.
Do you want to say what that is? Because it's sort of a bit better known in the US, I think. Most people in the UK may have heard it, but they might not know what codependency is. What does that mean?
Well, I would say a simple example for me, just to make it very simple, is that I didn't have a separate individual being. I had to merge with my mother to survive as a child. So I created very early neurotic patterns, which were healthy for me as a child to survive my, upbringing. But when I came out into the world, anytime I would move into a relationship, I would lose myself. I would just kind of merge into whoever I was with. So I couldn't set healthy boundaries. I couldn't take care of myself. So when I read this whole list, there were like 15, I was like 13 of them. I went and signed myself up for codependency treatment. Now, most people don't go sign themselves up, they get sent. But I'm a curious person, so I'm a seeker. And when
there's organizations around this. People might know about Codependence Anonymous, and this might sound weird to some people listening. Like, why would you have a problem with that? But like the basic idea of not being able to set boundaries, of tying your self-esteem to other people, getting involved in people, because that just causes mayhem for people if that's their pattern, right? It's very difficult to be happy if your happiness is totally dependent upon others and the reactions of others. I mean, well, this is not you're sort of saying it with a smile and a laugh, I'm guessing, because you've been through a long healing journey, but that's a fucking nightmare to someone. So I've got students who really have suffered from this.
Absolute nightmare. You can imagine as we move into parenting how much bigger of a nightmare it could be.
Okay, right? Okay, because say why. Let's spell everything out for the non-Boulderites listening.
Well, you can imagine when you merge with your children and their happiness becomes your life. So you can imagine,
I see.
Right? You can imagine being a child.
Doesn't every parent have that? I mean, every parent I've ever met has been, I'm famous for being anti-parent, by the way. Every parent I've ever met has been slightly confused with their identity. I mean, something I see a lot is people's Facebook picture has their children in it. Now that's meant to be a picture of you. Why has it got someone else in it? They're not you. Like that seems to be almost every parent I know. So how is, did you just magnify that?
Well, and if we merge with that, meaning they're responsible for our happiness, can you imagine what it's like to be the child? Right?
Okay, because, so the poor child has that put on them that they're responsible for the happiness, but making anyone responsible for your happiness is sort of a disaster, isn't it? Because we can barely control ourselves, let alone anyone else. Like that's a way to be miserable, surely.
Exactly. Now you have to remember we were all raised this way also, so this is passed down, right?
Okay. There's degrees of this through the generations. Some people have it more than others, and I imagine especially for women, like. I mean, my mum, who I do love and adore, said, but you were part of me. And I'm like, yes, the key word is were, mother. you know. It's like I'm married now, I've been around the world, you know. So it's and I know in certain cultures, this, you know, all my Jewish friends are always making jokes about this. It certainly seems to be that sort of mother-child bond, which is of course going to be strong, seems to be exaggerated in certain people in certain cultures, right?
Yes, and we can learn, if we train ourselves into healthy separation, we can have connection and separation. When you only want to connect, it becomes engulfment.
Engulfment, that's the good word. That's so engulfment is when you lose yourself, and that's almost held up as the romantic ideal as well, isn't it, Leslie? That we lose ourselves, you complete me, you know, this is like most love songs are actually codependency songs, right? Like,
yes, it's crazy. So when I began to explore that and really examine how I had fallen into that, that's when I began to start moving back into embodiment. It was not fun. It was not comfortable.
Your own self back.
Oh, it was not comfortable, because embodiment meant I had to go in and feel powerless and helpless and rejected and all those things I had organized my life to run away from, not to feel, right?
We always say, like, hey, welcome home to the body, like on this podcast, and come home, and mindfulness of the body. It's so great to come to the anchor. So for a lot of people, the body's a nightmare. The body's just feeling shit they don't want to feel, right? Like the powerlessness or the helplessness, the trauma related, whatever. It's just like, there's not a, you know, for those of us listening who are, say, yoga teachers or meditation teachers who just say casually, oh, come back to your body, it's nice. It's not nice for everyone.
Well, it's a counter-instinctual move for those of us that learned our strategy was to get out of our body to survive. Right. That was a healthy neurotic strategy as a child. But as you become an adult, and again, you want to have more of yourself, you want to have relationship, you want to be here, it's counter-instinctual to go back and get back in your body and feel all those things again. And becoming a parent, watch out. You're going to have to feel them all.
So what happens when you become a parent? What's the fucked up shit that might happen to me? Why are all my friends who are parents crazy? Is it just sleep deprivation? Is it this weird sort of narcissism seems to happen? Like what's the, because this is a huge taboo to talk about.
Yes.
Tell me if I'm wrong here, but I was talking to my friend Jane today, and she said parenting, she's a mum, she said parenting is simultaneously undervalued and overvalued at the same time. Like it's held up as both the best thing in the world, the most spiritual thing you could ever do, but simultaneously you're not paid for it, and you're sort of, oh, she's just the mum, you know, you'll hear this sort of thing. And that's a pretty tricky situation to be in.
Of course. And, you know, we all buy into it. I mean, it's really, really challenging. I'll give you my example. I had organized my whole life not to feel rejected, because that was my core vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So what do? I go to China and I adopt a young child that actually was abandoned and rejected. So it's like, duh, what was I thinking?
Right? Wow, something playing out there. Yeah. Chinese babies are 10% cuter, though, statistically. That's a fact. So
absolutely. So that. I couldn't get it in relationship. I kept leaving all of those. So here I am, finally, with my beautiful Zen master, my daughter. Right?
Why do people say the children are Zen masters?
Well, because
the child is not a Zen master. A Zen master is a Zen master.
Because she, and I've studied a lot, I've done a lot of Zen, and it felt like she was the strongest. The reason I say that was because I gave her permission where I couldn't get permission sometimes to my Zen master because of my egoic structure. But by joining with this child in this relationship, I began to turn back inward and take personal responsibility for my own embodiment and what that began to look like.
And why was that? Were you like, hey, this child I've adopted who I care for and want to well raise, I just don't want to fuck her up like I'm fucked up? Or was it that you just had to? Like what?
Not necessarily. The truth was that I closed the back door. I was sure that I was not going to leave. In all my other relationships, I had a back door I could leave. I could leave this relationship, but there was something about being a parent that I made an agreement with myself that I was going to go through instead of leave.
You know, it does strike me that I think it's overstated when people talk about parenting as the ultimate form of personal growth and blah, 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 having, you know, not tried all the others. But it's the one thing that's very difficult to leave, right? Like you can get divorced fairly easy. 50% of Americans and Brits get divorced. Jobs we leave all the time. You know, the countries we leave. It used to be a permanent relationship that you were part of a nation state. You know, if I was American, I'd certainly have gone to Canada by now, you know? Like there's ways in which we can leave those, but to leave your child, that's very rare, very rare. So that forces people, doesn't it, into that you can't escape. So if there's a pattern coming up, you can't just go, you know what, dump that girlfriend onto the next one. I think marriage is pretty good for that, but this is where I would say that it does seem like having children has this trump card on almost anything else I can think of.
Exactly. And then the way we escape, or the way I escaped in my parenting, was to go back into I'm the power and I'm the parent and you have to do what I say. And that was, again, an escape from feeling my discomfort. I had this erroneous belief that my daughter was causing my discomfort, so therefore she needed to fix it by behaving. My daughter was not causing my discomfort, she was triggering it. That discomfort in my body had been there since I was a wee one, right?
It's sort of fucked up to blame a 3-year-old, isn't it? You know, like, I mean, because when we're with an adult, we can say, look, the problem is them, I'm fine, but they're fucked up, the problem is them. But when it's a 3-year-old, you've got to go, listen, you know what, I need to take responsibility here. This has got to be my side of the street.
And think about how much power you give a 3-year-old when you blame them, when you think that they're causing your pain.
Okay, there's a lot to put on them, isn't it, this 3-year-old? And it is also, tell me about this, it's the only time in your life that you get to be an absolute fascist dictator. Now, unfortunately, you can't hit your kids very much anymore in the UK. That's frowned upon. You know, you can still shout at them. You can still send them to bed. Now, I can't do that with my employees. You know, I can't do that. I try that shit with my wife. I'd survive about 2 seconds. Like, you can't do that with any other human being. It is a unique situation of power, even if you don't. And who wouldn't be tempted to, you know, they say that power corrupts, and the, you know, absolute power of being a parent must corrupt. Absolutely, surely. Like, how do you deal with that amount of power over another human being?
Well, you begin to, if you're willing to examine yourself, because it feels so uncomfortable, if your guilt and shame gets big enough, hopefully you begin to turn back in and you begin to examine, my power is coming out of a feeling of powerlessness. My powerful behavior is because I feel so powerless with this 3-year-old, because I can't get them to listen to me. I can't get them to do what I want. I can't get them to get their shoes on. I can't get them to leave the house. I feel so powerful.
That's the interesting thing, is actually you don't have a power over a child. Well, I've worked with quite young children, and if they don't want to get their shoes on, they're not getting their fucking shoes on. And they, unless you're prepared to physically abuse that child, which is disgusting, you just can't make them. Like, and at that point, I remember with times I've been working with kids where first time I was Camp America when I was 18 or something, and I just went, there's literally nothing I can do here. This kid is not going to get out of bed. This kid is not going to go on the hike or whatever we were doing that day. You are powerless, and you're like, shit, I've tried every trick in the book and it's not working.
Yeah. So the minute I felt powerless, of course, I went down in my body, right, into those feelings when I was a young child, and I was powerless with my mother. So then as parents, we began to position as victims, right? So I felt victimized by my 3-year-old, which is crazy. Like when we break it apart, it's like, what? How could that happen? But it wasn't, when you're triggered, I wasn't an adult. I wasn't with my 3-year-old. I was feeling like now I'm back here with my mother and I'm a big person. So now I can overpower.
3-year-old trying to look after another 3-year-old, and that's a big ask. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So it's bringing stuff up, and this is what, you know, where parenting becomes the personal growth practice. It brings stuff up, you care deeply, and you can't get away from it.
Yes. So if we take personal responsibility, such as any time that my daughter would like get mad or slam the door, hit me, she was a hitter, instead of trying to control my daughter and have power over her, I began to ask myself, how was I not emotionally safe? How was I not truly embodied in my safety?
Can so the personal things, there's someone I care about very deeply who has that problem with their child. Yeah. Because it's quite, people think about hitting kids, but kids also hit their parents, right? That's a sort of thing.
But it was always, I could always track it back instead of going, we don't hit, or you're disrespectful. That would all be about me. I could always track it back to I was pushing, or I was pulling, or I was forcing, or I had an agenda. right?
Yeah.
So of course my daughter would do this. Like if someone was going to attack her in the world, wouldn't I want her to hit them if she didn't
Yeah.
feel emotionally safe or physically safe?
Yeah.
So instead of you need to do what I say, you need to listen to me, I began to turn back into my personal responsibility of how was I not safe with this child?
Mm-hmm.
How was I not truly embodied in my own safety so I could enter into this child's world in a way that they could perceive as safe?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
big work.
it strikes me, if you have unexamined neurosis, unexamined needs, unexamined patterns, as we all do, that they're going to get outed pretty quick in that relationship.
Absolutely. And for me, it's the one area parenting that is more unexamined than others. Like, especially if I was a spiritual seeker, you know, I did all the spiritual work, I did all this personal work, but I had very unexamined beliefs around parenting. Right. I really,
Right.
yeah. So I really had to examine because I was in so much pain because I swore I was not going to be my mother. And all of a sudden there I heard her voice coming out of me. Right.
That seems to happen. I've heard that from many people. I've seen it when I've even looked after kids. I've seen that. So why does that happen? Is it because I guess we don't have that many in a non-community-based society? How much parenting have we actually seen? Like, I'm not around parenting closely on a daily basis, right? I'm not really exposed to it. I've seen my sister, I've seen my mum on the and dad on the other side of it, but I haven't seen that many examples, right? So it's like, where do we model that from? It's something that most people feel they don't need to take classes in. Like, most people I know who buy a dog go to dog training classes. It's just sort of standard. You buy a dog, you have to have a license to do that in the UK, and then you go to sort of 4 or 8 like basic dog training lessons. That's considered a good thing to do the first time you buy a dog. And someone said to me that, oh, you're going to buy a dog, you want to buy this kind of dog, you want to get it from a good breeder, not a rescue dog if it's your first dog, and this is how you learn to deal with a dog. But nobody takes parenting lessons, do they? Like, there's some shame in that almost.
Even if they do, they usually take parenting lessons about how to control behavior. Like good behavior is the gold standard in our culture.
Yeah, right? As
opposed to emotional, supporting the safety of the emotional child. So if we go from the belief that feelings drive behavior, so when you were a young child and you had an embodiment experience, let's say you didn't get that candy that you wanted that candy so bad, you thought about it all day and your mom said no, and you have this embodiment experience where you think you're going to explode, and then you go hit your mom, right? So what happens when you go hit your mom?
I wouldn't have ever hit my mum. That would have ended quite badly. I had an Irish mum.
Right. So, but if you did, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get consequence. You're going to get punished. You're going to get told you're mean, you're bad, you're wrong.
Okay. Got it.
Well, hold on. Wait a minute. So would you want to stay in your body then?
Okay. So the child disembodies at that point because of the shaming, because of the being shouted at.
Well, like, who wants to get in trouble? I mean, if this doesn't feel pleasurable, the body's supposed to be a pleasurable, experience. But when you've got this intensity and then you act out, because you will, if you get too much right now, if you got too flooded in your body, you would try to get it out some way. Right? Yeah. But you're 3 years old, you do it inappropriately, let's say for the adult, but for the child, that's what you would do. You would go and like try to get it out. Okay.
Yeah.